I think that one of my all-time favorite tropes is the crouching moron, hidden badass. This preference likely stems from my inclination towards overpowered characters, as well as my preference for side characters, as I've always had an easier time empathizing with the side characters, and this trope usually gives the character their moment in the limelight, without making them take too much time with the main story. And when the trope shows up in the main character, it leads to having a main character that's missing something needed to solve the problem, and that leads to having to have pretty interesting side characters just to keep the story from going stale. I first started paying attention to the trope while watching Wolves Reign. Wolves Reign is the story about one of the last pack of wolves. Now, in elementary school, I was a kid who was obsessed with wolves. I was basically the opposite of a horse girl. So obviously, when I found an anime about wolves, I immediately started watching it, even though I couldn't really understand it. Anyway, in the series, there are 4 main wolves. There's the main character, the badass, the funny one, and the weak, pathetic loser that was raised like a dog, is always sniveling behind the other wolves. As you can tell, I didn't really have a high opinion of Toboe. Well, that was until in one episode, he snaps and 1v1s a 20-foot walrus in a fight, after the walrus basically bodies the rest of the pack by itself. I remember watching that scene over and over again, burning the neural pathway into my brain. I also remember this scene in an AMV. The AMV probably started my pathway into alt rock, and that probably led me into having an edgelord enjoyer face. Now, before people think that I just like it in anime, let me tell you about one of my other favorite types of shows: mystery. Shows like Columbo or Monk, where the main character acts in such a way that it makes others underestimate them. Sometimes it's a performance, like it is in Columbo, and other times it's not, like it is in Monk or Backstrom. I know Backstrom isn't well respected, but for some reason that show is burrowed into my brain. I think that in general, detective shows have a theme of crouching moron, hidden badass, because they're usually in a situation in which the main detective is underestimated, though there are other ways it shows up in Western media. For example, the veteran who's pretty incompetent but has lived through some stuff. Some examples of that is Hitchcock and Scully from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Crow from Ruby, and Uncle Iroh from Avatar. Though if we're talking about this trope in animation, I think one writes my favorite version of this trope in both One Punch Man and Mob Psycho 100, though it's probably not the characters that you're thinking of. See, when given the information I said throughout this video, you might assume that I'm talking about Saitama or Mob, as they are the model of crouching moron, hidden badass. But my new favorite version of this trope is the accidental version of it. So for One Punch Man, it would be King, a hero that became the #1 hero by complete accident without having any powers of his own, except a rumbling stomach, and now has to face being the #1 hero against opponents much stronger than him by simply bluffing his way through life. And for Mob Psycho 100, it would be Reigen, who was a trickster by nature, but accidentally got his students' powers for one fight, and now everyone assumes him to be some sort of god tier psychic. I especially started loving this version of the trope because it has more comedic elements in it. I think it's one of the changes that happened since I was a kid, as now I lean towards the trope's comedic factor instead of before, when it was basically just a power fantasy. If you want some good stories with characters like this, try reading Transfer Student Stormbringer or I'm Really Not the Devil's Lackey, both of which are a pretty fun read. Alright, that's all there is for me today, and if you folks have any tropes that you like, please put them in the comments below. And also, be careful if you're searching these tropes on Google, as it might send you to a website that will steal hours of your life from you.